All right, we are live. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Self-Publishing VirtuaCon 2015 panel. I am your moderator, Keith Majo. I've got panelists with me today that are resident experts in this particular topic area. First, we got Jacob Wood. We have Tom McGrenery. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, Tom, please correct me.
No, that's it.
Awesome. And then and we've got Kat Tobin. I think
Hopefully, yeah. I'm not
yes.
sure. Do we have me?
Yes.
Yes, we have you.
Hooray!
All right. We've gotten over some technical hurdles this morning, so
Yeah.
hey, congratulations to everybody.
Yay.
All right. That's kind of my brief little introduction. I'd like to give everybody, each panelist, a few moments to kind of introduce themselves, their companies, and kind of give themselves some shout outs. So, without further ado, let's start with Kat.
So my name's Kat Tobin, and I'm the managing director and co-owner at Pelgrane Press, publishers of such excellent games as 13th Age, Knights of Black Agents, and Trail of Cthulhu. So I pretty much do everything around there, and as well as that, I've got experience with working with much smaller, kind of more indie publishers as well. So I kind of know self-publishing from a lot of different angles.
Great, great. Thanks for being part of the panel. Let's see, from my left to my right, I got Jacob.
Hi, I'm Jacob Wood from Accessible Games, and I'm the marketing manager for Third Eye Games. So I have some different experience in a few different fronts. I also freelance for a couple of different companies. Yeah, so my probably most well-known game would be Cypunk, the Fudge Cyberpunk RPG, and Monster Kart Mayhem. I've been doing this for several years now, so I've got quite a bit of experience, and I write a lot about my game publishing experiences on my blog. So feel free to check those out. It's at accessiblegames.biz, B-I-Z.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. And Tom.
Hey, yeah, so I'm Tom McGrenery, and in my guise as Porcupine Publishing, I put out a few games, including the English edition of a Brazilian indie post-apocalyptic thing called UED. And currently on Kickstarter, although I assure you I would have done this panel even if I didn't have a thing kickstarting, is my own game called Melandros, which is set in Brazil, but not by a Brazilian, but rather by me, and it's powered by Drama System, as published by Kat Tobin's Pelgrane Press. I've done a fair amount of game freelancing, but perhaps more importantly for this panel, I also used to work for Oxford University Press and Macmillan, planning and editing language textbooks and stuff like that. So I've seen, I've been on the inside of kind of large-scale traditional publishing as well.
Great. Thanks again all for being here. This is going to be a great conversation. So one last kind of order of business before we jump into a really roundtable type conversation. For anybody viewing, we have the Q&A feature enabled. So if you're watching and you want to throw up a question, please do, and I'll fire it off to the panelists for them to kind of open up discussion on it. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into this. We all know publishing, let alone self-publishing, is a challenge in and of itself, but to be successful in it is even harder. So I'd like to open up the table and kind of go around. I'd like to start with Tom. And Tom, in your opinion, what's some common mistakes that new folks entering this self-publishing world tend to make, whether it's due to inexperience or bad advice? Some things people need to be aware of.
Okay, sure. Well, I would say that one thing that I guess people that we never eventually see is they're sort of a bit too intimidated, I think, by the apparent kind of complexity and slickness maybe of things they see already on the market. But that's kind of a mistake, and I think you can definitely nowadays it's very easy to keep things pretty simple and make stuff that's kind of got a good DIY aesthetic to it, if that's the way you want to go and that's the way you have to go, maybe. And within knowing your own limitations, you can make some good stuff. But the flip side of that is you have people who maybe don't know their limitations, kind of not intimidated enough about the process of publishing, in the sense that nowadays publishing is a lot more accessible and you can do it a lot quicker, but it hasn't necessarily got a whole lot easier. And there's all sorts of stuff about publishing that's really boring, proofreading, knowing the difference between the different lengths of dashes, knowing how to set up a PDF to send to the printers and things like that. So you've really got to, if you want to make something that people will take the time to look through and probably read, you've really got to pay attention to these kind of details. And if it's too boring to stand, get someone who's interested in that stuff to help you, because there are people who like doing layout or editing stuff, and they will, they'll come on board.
Very, very good. Thanks. Let's throw the same question over to Kat. You're muted, Kat.
Right, I should be unmuted now, I think. I think following up on what Tom said, definitely, I think people can be quite intimidated by coming into it, but it's become so much more accessible with things like Drive-Thru RPG, and being able to print on demand now, as opposed to having to go in and actually print, a massive amount of books that you then need to store and sell. So I think kind of a common mistake, really, I think, is maybe running before you can walk. So I've come across some people who have, for example, paid a lot of money for art, thinking that would kind of give them credibility, or paying a lot of money for other resources, or working really hard to make the game look a particular way, when actually you don't necessarily need to do all of that. And you can produce a really, really great game very, very simply, and very, very cheaply with it. So you don't have to spend money on it to have a good game, basically, I think is what I'm trying to say with that. You can do it all for free very, very easily, and that would be my recommendation.
No, very good points. Yeah, the whole run before you walk is not the right order in which to do things.
Yeah.
So I think that's a common mistake. I don't care what industry you're in, it tends to happen a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's people come in and they have a game and they get so excited about it. And I think really you can, like I said, you can publish very, very simply and very, very cheaply. And for people starting off, I think my recommendation would be to do it that way, rather than potentially spend a lot of money that you might not have straight away for not much benefit in terms of publicity or whatever for your game.
Right. No, good points. Let's bring the same question around the table to Jacob. I know you've got some unique perspectives on DIY type projects.
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is that I've never made a mistake while self-publishing, so I'm not sure if I can answer this question, but I'll give it a try. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to think that they can do it all alone. There's a lot of help and support for self-publishers nowadays that wasn't there even 5 years ago, and that makes a lot of difference when you are trying to get started, because now you can get your questions answered in a variety of forums. So there's never any reason to make a guess at something when you can go to Google Plus, or you can go to RPGNet, or you can hit up somebody from the Indie Game Developers Network and ask them your questions. The other one would be to think that your very first project should be the big project. And what I mean by that is that usually you want to publish your baby, the one that you've been working on for 2 to 3 years, and you really want to polish it up and bring it to market, but that's not the best way to start with publishing. It's important to, like Kat was saying, walk before you run, and try publishing a couple of smaller ideas before you spend all of your time and effort and energy on publishing the thing that you have spent so much time with and are closest to, because that's when you're going to be the most disappointed if it fails, because you're not going to have a community built behind you until you've got those other little games built up first.
Great, thanks. No, those are good points. I mean, again, the common theme here seems to be walk, jog, run. Don't go right for the finish line. You gotta get around the bends first, and those are really good takeaways. I want to come back around to Kat with our second question. What do you think is the most important, in your opinion, the one or two most important resources that you would recommend for new folks to kind of investigate and figure out how to take advantage of?
I think, again, going back to what Jacob was talking about, I think a support network, is probably the single biggest resource that I would recommend to people. So there are so many different online resources now. There's a fantastic community on Google Plus of a lot of people who have done it themselves already. They've already made the mistakes. They've gained the experience. They have so much knowledge to share. It's similarly on RPG Geek, on RPG Net. There are a lot of resources out there now for new people. So I would definitely recommend that people go out there, tell people what they're trying to do, and ask for advice. Be open, be honest, be vulnerable, say, I need help, can anyone help me? And people will. So making that network, making those connections with people who are doing similar things or who have already done similar things, I think is the most important resource you can have starting out. I think, again, other useful resources are things like Wikimedia Commons has an awful lot of free art resources, which is fantastic for people who are just starting out. You don't have to pay money for art. You can get some really great images just from, like I said, Wikimedia Commons is a really good resource, and they've got a listing as well of a lot of other sites that also have free art. So there are places that you can go to get things you might be tempted to pay for free. And then in terms of, I don't think that having the right software is necessary, but I think certainly some kind of photo manipulation software is probably pretty useful. I mean, I use Photoshop all the time, but things like GIMP as well is a free resource that it's an open source software, I think, that you can download. So having something that means that you can create banners, logos, images, all of these kind of promotional things that you'll need for when you're starting off and talking about your game, I think are quite important as well.
Great. Yeah, GIMP is, I don't have Photoshop. I couldn't figure out how to use Photoshop even if I had it. But
it takes a while, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, there's a steep learning curve, but GIMP has been really helpful for me in some of the projects I've worked on. So definitely I recommend that one as well. Like to bring the conversation, same question over to Jacob. Do you have anything you can add to that, other resources that you think are important for new folks to kind of go investigate?
Definitely. I'll name drop a couple of Google Plus communities because they're all fantastic places where you can go to get assistance with self-publishing. First, like I had mentioned before, is the Indie Game Developer Network. We now have a outward-facing community that's for anybody to join. The Indie Plus community on Google Plus is fantastic, and they've now hit something like 400 or 500 members. The RPG Design Network and the RPG Workshop are design-focused communities. So you don't even need to leave Google Plus unless you want to head over to RPG Geek, where they've also got a fantastic community of fans who are willing to talk about just about any type of game and are very fantastic at supporting the people who are who frequent the website. I've had a lot of support just from the folks at RPG Geek because I've been a member of the community for so long, and everybody there seems to really support their own. So having that community, like we were talking about, is one of the best ways to make sure that your game becomes successful, because you're not the only person talking about it. You need to have other people talking about your game if you want anybody to play your game. And then the other great resources are, like Kat was saying, some different free arts. There's also openclipart.org. DriveThruRPG has a lot of art packs that you can buy for cheap, and it's just stock art that you get from various companies who are on there selling them. And you can find designs for just about anything. Some of my best small works were published with just a covered purchase for $5 or $10 and some text that I threw on the top of it. And then the text of the book that I wrote for free. So there's a lot of things that you can do to produce those small games like I was talking about before, with very limited out-of-pocket expense.
Great. The communities, I don't belong to some of those Google Plus communities because I'm not an RPG designer or developer. But at the same time, I've poked my head around in some of those communities. There's some awesome, amazing conversations happening, both in the Google Plus communities on RPG Geek, even RPG Net, and even a variety of blogs out there in the blogosphere. There's some amazing communication and content sharing, idea sharing that's going on. Definitely worth everybody looking into those avenues. Tom, do you have anything else you would like to add on that topic?
To be honest, I'm going to struggle to add anything to what Kat and Jacob have already done. The only thing I might say is just think about templates rather than staring at a blank screen. Just whatever you're thinking of making. Google that, followed by the word template. You'll find loads of stuff for whatever software you've got. And there are gaming kind of related ones as well. Kevin Crawford of Cine Nomine Publishing, he's got a freebie. Like if you want to make an OSR dungeon module thing, go on Drive-Thru RPG, download his. Hang on, I've got this in another tab. The Smoking Pillar of Lan Yu. Download that. It's free, and it comes with all the files to make your own thing in that style. And that's what you want to be looking at, because maybe you don't want to do what they've done, but you'll have a starting point to start, moving things around, deleting stuff, putting in your own ideas.
Awesome. Great.
Do you mind if I interject one or two other things?
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Just as a follow-up to that, Kevin has a really great amount of resources that are available, and he's a regular at the RPG Net game design community, and he's always a font of advice. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was Jason Pitt's RPG Design Panelcast, which is mostly a series of panels just like this one that he's recorded over time. He's up to like 60-something panels, so they're all great resources. It's the RPG Design Panelcast.
Great. Oh, that's a great follow-up. I want to switch gears a little bit in terms of the question. We can start with we can start with Jacob on this one. To be a self-publisher, to be a publisher in general, I mean, we all become, or publishers become project managers. And I know time management, I do project management for a living, and time management is one of those things that is so hard for people to wrap their head around and master. But in terms of self-publishing, what are your recommendations for new DIY self-publishers to stay on task and on time and get their product from cradle to reality?
It's a great question. That's something that I've struggled with from time to time myself, even though I've taken some college courses about time management and I'm seeking a project management degree. It's still something that is hard to stay on task, especially with all of the social media that's easy to get caught up in. One of the things I would suggest would be to close your browser when you're writing, because you need to not have the allure of Google Plus or Facebook or some other website available to you in the background while you're trying to design. Because without writing and without designing, you're not actually publishing at all. So it's not enough to just be part of the community. You also have to be doing what you're talking about doing. The other thing is to create kind of a time boxing technique where you decide that you're going to spend a certain amount of time devoted to one task, and after, say, 15 minutes, you reevaluate where you're at with that task. And if you're about to finish with it, go ahead and finish with it. And if you're not, ask yourself if what you're doing is being conducive to your goals. And if what you're doing in the moment is not being conducive to those goals, then stop that thing and move on to the next thing. Because it's very easy to get sidetracked and to go down the rabbit hole and wind up not getting anything important done because you've been looking at pictures of puppy dogs and cats on YouTube, and, well, I guess you'd look at videos on YouTube, but you'd be spending all of your time not focused. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to get to.
Right. No, that makes perfectly good sense. No wonder I can't keep on some projects. I find cat memes on occasion. You know, the proverbial internet memes are my downfall sometimes. Let's jump over to Kat. Do you have any advice? I know, I mean, because you run a little bit larger publishing house, so I know your constraints for project management might be a little different, but I think there's some commonality there. And you're muted.
Okay, it should be unmuted again. Yeah, I can. I use a couple of different things to basically manage my time and to plan out tasks. So I've had a look at there's a product called Trello, which is a free product management software, and that's really powerful in terms of being able to set up projects and then assign tasks to that project. You can assign them to different people within your team. And you can make checklists and all of that kind of stuff. So I've started using it. I haven't quite got the hang of it yet. So currently what I'm using is, again, this is all free software, a program called any.do. So that's any.do. And that's just a very simple checklist. So you literally type in a thing you want to do. You can set up subtasks within that, and you can put deadlines on it, or you can say, I want to get that done today, tomorrow, someday. And I also use Toggle, T-O-G-G-L, as a time tracking software. So I can, over time, I can see how much time I've been spending on each individual project, and like Jacob was saying, decide whether or not I'm spending my time effectively, and check that where I'm spending my time is what I want to be spending my time on, and that I'm not spending too much time looking at cat pictures on the internet. Which is, it's a difficulty for all of us, I think, not looking at cat pictures on the internet. And another thing as well that I've found quite useful in terms of short-term productivity. So if you really do need to, say if you've, and I know this is the case for a lot of self-publishing, people involved in self-publishing, is they have day jobs. So then they have to come home in the evening and get into their second job of writing their game. So if you use something like Pomodoro, it's basically it blocks off time in, I think it's 25-minute blocks, and you can say, right, I'm just going to spend 25 minutes doing this thing, and you just set it to run, and you just frantically type for 25 minutes, and that's it. There's no distractions, there's nothing. You're just, because it's time pressured, it really helps you. Certainly, it helps me to really focus on the task at hand. So they're just things that I use to kind of make sure that I'm planning things properly, because I think the plan is half the battle, really. If you have things planned out properly and then you stick to that plan, you're pretty much there.
Great, good points. I'm gonna have to check out some of the software because I could probably use some. But Tom, how do you manage your time, and what are your tips for those watching?
Well, generally I manage my time quite poorly, so I may be a terrible person to ask this question, but one thing I think is maybe unique to not to working for yourself, because of course when you're a freelancer you have deadlines and they're very motivating as they whoosh past. And but when you're just working on your own self-publishing projects, it's very easy to find yourself just tinkering away and changing this and that and kind of working on version 0.8, 0.1, and so on. And I found that a good way to get out of this, and it especially happens if you're working on your baby project, is to just tell other people about it. I don't mean like do a press release. I know, that's possible, but just say in public to people maybe people on Google Plus. Oh yeah, I'm doing this thing, and I'm kind of this is my vague plan for it maybe, and then they'll mention it hopefully at some point, and you've forced yourself you've committed yourself to a kind of outside spur to actually get on with doing something, and showing stuff to people eventually, instead of it being like the car in your granddad's garage that was forever up on bricks when you were a kid.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I know with some of the projects I do for my day job, because blogging's my night job. Day job is, like I said, project management. Sometimes I got to commit to something to get a deliverable for my boss or another boss, and just say I'm going to do it, and then that kind of hold myself to it because I've committed to it, and I don't want to look like the fool by not being able to deliver on time what I said I would deliver, and that type of stuff. Okay, great responses. I want to, keeping on the same vein in terms of management, let's talk about editors and artists real quick. I know we've talked about, there's free resources for art out there, and, I know there's a bazillion resources, but there are, when you want to work with an an artist or you want to work with an editor, because Lord knows everything needs editing. At some stage, it's going to need some editing, some tech reviewing, proofing, and whatnot. What is your strategy for connecting with the right artist or the right editor that's going to be able to deliver what it is you need them to deliver, or what it is that you think you need them to deliver for you? Let's start with Kat.
Okay. I would love to say that I have some kind of secret insight onto how to find perfect artists and editors. I really, unfortunately, don't. So what tends to happen, certainly for us, is that artists and editors approach us, and they say that they're interested in working with us. But something that I think that is transferable and that is a very useful thing to do is to, whoever you're working with, set very, very clear expectations up front. So say, this is exactly what I want from you, this is when I need it by, this is how much I'm willing to pay, and, you know, kind of say this is like a hard deadline, or this, you know, there's a bit of flexibility in this. If it runs over, it's not too bad. But make it very, very clear what it is, what the work is that you're offering. And I think that really, really helps both you and the artist or editor, because it's a similar principle across both, to set out the project in advance and be very, very clear about the deliverables, about what you'll provide them, about what you expect them to provide you, and when you expect them to provide us. That's a really, really important part of working with any freelancers, no matter what kind of freelancers they are. And then I think basically, again, word of mouth recommendations, going on to Google+, asking people who are already working with artists, already working with editors, or finding artists that you really like. I mean, there are a load of great Kickstarters happening. Again, there are a load of great self-published games. If you see a cover that you like, ask who that artist was, and then approach them, ask them if they'd be willing to work with you. You know, there are a lot of ways of finding artists and editors if you go out and look, and if you make sure that you build your network of people who are doing similar things.
Great. No, those are great points. Same question. Let's slide over to Tom this time. How do you work with these folks? How do you find the right folks?
Okay. Well, I think in terms of finding people, my answer is pretty much the same as Kat's last bit there. You know, look for stuff that you like, find out who did it, and then just get in touch with them, which is easier now than it has ever been. You know, everyone's got especially artists, they've all got, they've got a portfolio website, which is great because maybe that one piece was their only good one. You can go and check that out. And then I think the second thing is to do approach it very seriously. And a lot of people, when you get in touch with them, they'll be sort of, oh yeah, don't worry about it. This Google Hangouts chat can be effectively our contract, and you kind of have to say, no. Because it's important to know what's expected, what's going to happen, and also it just really sets a kind of professional tone for your relationships, that you won't end up kind of chasing each other via email, that kind of thing. And one tip I can offer here is, I've just realised it's like I'm obsessed with templates, but the secret weapon of big publishing, at least the ones I worked for before, is a book called Clark's Publishing Agreements, a book of precedents. And what this is, it's like a big kind of fat dictionary-style book that just has loads and loads of sample agreements between, like, you know, if you want someone to do a cover, if you want someone to do editing, if you want someone to produce the label for a CD that you're including with your book, and you can just flip through, pick one that matches what you want, and it will probably be way too complex for what you need, but you just kind of take out the bits that you want, and print it, sign it, leave a space for them to do it, and you're pretty much done.
Very cool. I'll have to check out that book. Might help me in some other things I'm working on. Jacob, I know you have in the past used the communities a lot as sounding boards and things like that. I know you've done, like everybody else here, successful Kickstarters. What's your recommendation in terms of finding that right person?
My recommendation of finding people would be to, once again, tap your communities, talk to people who've done this before. It's easy to go somewhere and find artists. You go to DeviantArt or you go to RPG Nets looking for work communities, and artists are everywhere looking to find a publisher to work with them. But I've found that artists are also prone to missing deadlines, so you need to set those expectations with them up front, and sometimes talk to people who might know that artist and who might have worked with them in the past and find out how they are about their deadlines, because they might have amazing art, but they can't deliver it on time, and that sets your project deadlines way back. Also, knowing how to talk to artists is really important to that end, because you might not speak their language in the language terms that they need it. So if you don't speak RGB and CMYK and 300 DPI, then you're going to get lost, and that's going to kind of hamper your communications with them. I've actually written a couple of different blog articles on my website, accessiblegames.biz, about how to talk to artists, and I've also written some about editors and how to discern the different types of editors, because there are many. So knowing what you're looking for is best before you go out looking for it.
Fair enough. No, that's a good point, especially on the editors, because I do some editing on the side, more for self-torture and pleasure. I don't know. But there is a difference between a proofreader and a copy editor and a tech reviewer and
right.
You know, layout editor.
Yeah. Could I just? Oh.
There you go, Kat.
Oh,
go ahead, jump in.
Just jumping in on the editor things, actually. You were talking about there being different types of editors, and there's certainly for us, we have a couple of different types. Like we've got proofreaders, like you said, but then we also have game kind of more developmental editors who tend to look at the game overall. So I think my recommendation for that would be to find somebody who knows your game well. So to look for editors among your friends, maybe, or people that you're close to online, and people who have actually got that familiarity with your game is really important for doing that kind of structural editing as opposed to proofreading. So that was all I was going to say on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks for jumping in with that. Because I mean, if you have somebody, I've been asked to tech review games and kind of look at it from a rules mechanical analysis for a game system I'm unfamiliar with. So I have to educate myself first.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily still make me a subject matter expert on that individual's game. And that's where if you want somebody to analyze your rules and make sure that, you know, a stat block matches what the rules say, you've got to have that familiarity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's very, very good points. Great. Let's switch gears slightly. I mean, everybody here on this panel has done Kickstarters or is working on Kickstarters and bringing product to market. But what does I want to explore real kind of briefly what the future of the RPG industry looks like. Are we still working in a print world? Are we moving more towards a PDF world? It's a kind of a bone of contention in the community. Let's start with Tom on this one. Tom, where do you see the future of the RPG industry? Are we PDF or are we paper or are we both? And why?
Let's just make predictions. They're going to be immediately falsified. That's good. No, I don't know. But certainly, I mean, a little while ago, it did look like everything was going very heavily digital. But the urge to collect things and to have books as a physical artifact, this has been kind of the death of it, but it's still very strong. But having said that, I think that if you are starting out in self-publishing, definitely want to begin digital only, like at least just for maybe a few months, if nothing else, because there is one massive advantage that PDFs have over books, which is that you can resend people a copy with corrections in it for free if you discover that something is wrong, and that could be pretty important. You know, especially if it's on something like Drive-Thru, where they have, you know, you can automatically update stuff in people's libraries, even without telling them if you don't feel like it. If you don't feel like admitting that you included something terribly wrong on one page. You know, whether that's the future of the RPG cottage industry as it is as a whole, I have no idea, honestly. But if you're starting self-publishing, it should definitely be your immediate future.
Great. Okay, let's move over to Jacob on this. I know you've done a lot with PDFs and some on print on demand. So where do you see the industry from your perspective, and what's a good avenue for folks to follow?
Yeah, that's like Tom was saying, kind of a tough question. So I primarily do PDFs. That's most of my sales, and print on demand is also a pretty big chunk of it. There are still a lot of people who want that physical book to set on the table or to put on their shelves. I'd say almost half of my Cypunk Kickstarter sales were to a print version of some kind. But print on demand is really great for small publishers because there's not an upfront investment of $4,000 to get a minor print run. With that being said, Third Eye Games is currently doing a Kickstarter for the Ninja Crusade 2nd edition, and they're not doing print on demand for the first time ever. Malloy is doing a offset print run to get his books into stores and on shelves, and so there's definitely still a market for that, but we're talking about companies who've been doing this for several years and who have an audience that support offset print runs. For starting publishers, like Tom was saying, I would recommend sticking with the PDFs or even POD, because you can update a POD file and send that off to people. And sure, those who've already purchased the book would need to repurchase it if they want the updates. So I would recommend sticking to minor changes if that were the case. But at least you're not investing several $1,000s up front on several thousand copies of books that you're probably not going to sell.
Oh, great. No, fair enough. Bringing it over to Kat, what is your take on this? Print or PDF? I know you do both.
I think gamers are like I think the material culture of role playing is so strong, and it has such an extended history, and like every time I do one of these panels and people are in their home offices, all you see behind them are rows and rows of books. And I honestly don't think that I would be very surprised if we as role players ever moved fully away from books, because I think we just love having a tangible product in our hand. Or even things like GM screens to kind of we love the materials that come with it, the dice and the books, and I think that's a really big part of the pleasure of role playing for a lot of gamers. So I would be personally very, very surprised if we moved entirely away from books. But I mean, in saying that, digital books like PDFs and ebooks they're getting better and better every year, as the technology is improving. And something that I don't think many people are doing, which is surprising, is really looking at what interactive features we could be bringing into ebooks. So I know a lot of publishers like us are doing PDFs and ebooks, but there's very little in the way of interactivity. I don't think we're properly using the digital book media to its full effectiveness yet. So I would expect to see more interactivity, I think, in ebooks going forward. That would be my bet, I think.
Great. That's
but
awesome.
in terms of bringing things to market, I'm just going to say exactly what Tom and Jacob have already said. I mean, I would always recommend that you start off with PDFs, because you have a very small upfront cost, and then you have no more cost. You can just put it out for sale. You can build up a product line. You have things that you can share quickly and easily with reviewers. And there are so many places like Drive-Thru as well, like Virtual RPG, where you can just put it up and it'll tick along selling things. You don't have to do anything. If you want to make a change to it, as Tom said, you can make a change to it. You then get a little extra marketing hit, because you could email all the people who've bought it and say, hey, I've added this new bit to it. You might want to go check it out. So you can kind of, you can use that medium to keep talking to having a conversation with your customers about your products. So I would definitely recommend to people starting off to do PDFs first. And it also, you can make all your mistakes in PDFs, because if you make a mistake in a print run, it's, as Jacob said, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars just to do a small print run. So that's potentially a lot of money to be gambling. So make your mistakes in PDFs first, where they're quick and easy to change, and then once once you're a bit more confident and you're ready to move to the next step, then look at offset. Maybe try print on demand as a kind of a gateway to printing. That way, because that gives you a really good sense of how many people actually want to buy the physical copies of your books as well. So you can use it as a kind of a marketing, as a market analysis tool.
Great. No, that's a great little perspective on that.
One additional thing about that, actually, something that I've kind of just anecdotally noticed is that people who are willing to spend the money on your print-on-demand product are the people more likely to actually read through the entire game and or put it onto the table. I found that PDFs are kind of the window shopping of role-playing games right now, where you might own a bunch of them, but they're just for sort of your reading material or for flipping through. But
I'm guilty.
Yeah, and
also
I do it too. We all do it. But if you own that print product, you're more likely to flip through it because you've actually invested the time, energy, and money into getting it onto your table.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, because I do a lot of window shopping. I'm trying to find the right game for me at the right time and place. I do want to switch gears. We do have a question that came in from a viewer. So I'm thinking we'll do the question and then we'll kind of wrap up because we'll be hitting our time boundary. But Daniel Adams is asking that he states that he finds it difficult to move from planning to the grand scheme phase of a project and bringing it to the real world. He wants to kind of pick your brains and find out how do you guys begin a new project? What is your go-to starting point? And if you have any advice for creators on getting their projects off the ground. I think it's a really spot-on question for this panel. Let's start with Tom on this one.
Well, I think it just has to be the classic creative writing advice, which is you just start with whatever you have, whether that be, let's say you're writing the text that you're thinking about. If you've only got the middle of the book, you start there, you figure out the beginning later. If you've got a good start, you start with that. You don't just stare at the page and try to go in order. You just get everything down, recorded somehow on paper. If you're an artist, you sketch things. And in the same way, you can do that with any project. You can start thinking about the bits that are coming to mind first. And yeah, there are going to be bits that you won't be able to link in for ages and ages and ages. And maybe you have to have several things kind of. What I do is I just have files that literally just have ideas with bullet points in them sometimes. And then many of them never progress past that stage. Some of them you open and you think, what was I thinking about that? And that's fine. And then some things gradually build and build until they achieve the critical mass necessary to actually turn into something that you'd be willing to let other people look at and maybe, hopefully, give you money for. And yeah, that's really all. Yeah, that's all I got. Just start with what you have. That's the thing.
Great. No, good point. Jacob, what's your take on this?
So some people work really well with outlines. I don't in particular. I've tried outlining a few times, and sometimes it does help because it can let you put down those ideas that you have where you're starting in the middle, and then you can come back to those later. But personally, I just open a Word document and I start writing down all of the ideas that I've had to date about this concept, and I will go back and flesh those all out later. So I guess it's kind of like outlining in some ways, but I tend to be a little bit more focused on the content rather than just the bullet points myself. But getting enough down to see that you have like an idea that can form a solid game out of that eventually is really important, because I've had a lot of really fantastic ideas that I might have like one or two concepts for, and then as I start to write them, nothing else comes out. And so I just put that into my ideas folder, and I may or may not come back to that in the future. But at least it was a way to get that creative spark out of your head for the moment. And then as you continue to write on a specific project, you'll find that you have a lot of passion for it, and that will give you the drive to kind of continue working on it.
Good. No, when I do projects, I do a lot of the brainstorming phase, and I literally, it's like just throwing words on the wall. I just throw them at Word or Excel or whatever I'm working in. even scratch pads when I'm sitting in meetings. I just throw words, and usually they start to coalesce into something usable down the road. Myself and outlines and bullet points don't work so well. I tend to get lost in the minutia of them. So, Kat, what's your take on that question for Daniel?
I think that the key thing, I mean, you know, people will always say this, and I know it's quite frustrating. The key thing for writers is to write. So, absolutely backing up what Tom said. Just put it down. Just put it down in Excel, in Word, in whatever format you want to use. But get it out of your head and onto a thing so that you can look at it properly. Because you know you can toss ideas around in your head, and as Jacob was saying, you know, and they might seem really great, but it's only when you get to the point of where you actually lay it down and you try and look at it as a game outside of yourself that you can really start to decide whether or not it's something that you're passionate enough about to continue. I am a big fan of the outline. I'm also a really big fan of what they call the elevator pitch. So it's like a 50-word kind of synopsis of your game. And I've written quite a few LARPs, which are they're not quite like role-playing games, but it's a similar kind of writing exercise. So I would always kind of start with the 50-word kind of summary of the game, and then I break things into different categories. So like for a role-playing game, that might be like character generation or mechanics or setting, and then kind of like with what Tom was saying about the different files. You allocate different files and folders under those headings, and then you can just put whatever kind of ideas you have within those. So, but just write it. Write it and look at it. Outline or don't outline, depending on what works for you better. But just put it on paper.
Awesome. No, thanks everybody. We're coming up on we're getting close to that 1 hour boundary. It's kind of like final thoughts. You have anything you guys want to add as a final? Hey, here's the one last thing I want to throw at you as a self-publisher. Little takeaway nuggets of information for our viewers, current and in the future. Kat, we'll jump right back at you, and then we'll kind of go down the line, and then we're going to do our wrap up.
Yeah, I think definitely just picking up on something that Tom's already said. Tell people about your game. Tell people what you're up to. You know, have it in your email signatures. Have it on your Google Plus profile. Have it on your RPG Geek profile. Say your RPG Net signature. Just tell people what you're working on, because that gives you an incentive. It gives you an outside force to make you actually work on those things when you're talking to people about them, and people are aware that you're working on that particular project, because then people will ask you about it. They'll be like, how's that going? And you're like, oh yeah, I should do something about that, shouldn't I? So yeah, tell people about it. Set up a blog, like a very simple WordPress site or something, or even have like a Google Plus space of your own, and just post about it. Post about your process. Post about the troubles you're having. Post about the successes you're having. You know, just keep telling the world about it, and eventually it'll have to come out there.
Great, thanks. Jacob, your final thoughts.
To pick up on something that Kat said, have a blog. Before I even had my own official website, I had just a blogspot blog for Cypunk, and I was posting about it, and I had maybe 2 or 3 views per day, and those were all from China. Just people, bots and advertisers. But eventually you'll pick up an audience as you continue to post about it and talk about it in your various communities, and down the line, when you do want to go and publish it, people are going to be asking you information about your game, and you can say, well, I wrote about that on my blog. Here's the link. My Cypunk Kickstarter page was filled with links to blog posts about the game mechanics and the setting, and all of those were available because I had started with that months and months and months in advance of doing anything promotion-wise with the game. So just talking about your game, writing about what you're writing about is really important.
Good. Tom, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess the addendum to that, tell people what you're doing, is also go look what other people are doing. The RPG industry is really closely linked in the sense that the people that make stuff are also about 50% of all your sales are going to go to someone who has also published their own role-playing game. So that's the thing. Go and be interested in their stuff, and not just because they might agree to help playtest your thing later, but also because you'll be able to see stuff they've got going on, stuff that works, maybe ideas that you sort of had and you now realize are good or bad ideas, and that's where you'll get more. Not just you don't just want feedback on your things. You want to see new stuff that will spark ideas for the things that you create.
Great. Hey, I just want to thank you three for being part of this panel. This has been amazing. I've learned a lot. I hope anybody listening now or in the future can take away some great little bits of information that they can implement. So with that, thank you everybody for watching this 2015 VirtuaCon panel on self-publishing. Like I said, hopefully you've learned something. There's some takeaways here that you can use in your own projects to help bring your projects to your market, your customers, and make some of the most amazing RPGs in the future. With that, be sure to check out the VirtuaCon community on Google Plus for other panels we've done this weekend, and head on over to rpggeek.com, and you can find out more about VirtuaCon and a nice segment of the RPG community as well. So with that, thank you, and good day, good night, good morning, wherever you are.